In the year 2047, humanity faced its quietest revolution. This wasn't a clash of armies or a cry for rebellion, but a slow, inevitable shift, like tectonic plates grinding deep beneath the surface. Cities gleamed with progress, yet beneath their steel and glass, a new fragility pulsed, with stability fraying at the edges. Around the world, people were awakening to truths once dismissed as alarmist whispers. Natural disasters surged in frequency and force, leveling communities and displacing millions. The economic divide had widened into a chasm, with most scraping by as a tiny elite amassed unimaginable wealth. And though technology had raced forward, automation displaced more jobs than it created, leaving entire generations uncertain of their place in this shifting world. In the heart of New Brooklyn, a city resilient but worn, Dr. Alaya Chen stood at her office window, watching the evening streets below. The faces in the crowd were weary, etched with tension that seemed as permanent as the shadows cast by the setting sun. Alaya had witnessed these subtle shifts day by day, and she could feel it. Society was coming undone. As an economist, she had spent years analyzing data, crafting models, and advising those who could afford her expertise, but her work had started to feel empty. Her equations failed to capture the despair she now witnessed daily. Her career, once a source of pride, had become a series of hollow tasks, propping up a system she'd lost faith in. As Alaya sat in her office, watching the city lights flicker across her window, a quiet restlessness stirred within her. Her mind drifted back to a time when her work had felt meaningful, when she'd believed in the power of change. But years of navigating the same flawed system had worn her down, and the optimism she'd once held had faded, gradually replaced by a resigned acceptance of the world's brokenness. She sighed, wondering if any way forward didn't lead back to compromise. Something vital had slipped through her fingers, a purpose, a clarity she'd lost along the way. Now, a new purpose seemed just beyond her reach, waiting to be discovered. If only she dared to look beyond what she knew. For the first time in years, she felt a faint pull toward something larger, a vision beyond herself, a spark that whispered of change. Beyond the horizon is the story of that journey, a journey into the unknown, where deeply held beliefs about survival and progress are challenged. It is the story of those who dared to believe in a future that didn't rely on power or profit, who dreamed of a society where abundance replaced scarcity. It is a story of hope, resilience, and the courage to build beyond the limits of what is known. For in the end, Horizon 1 was more than a city. It was a testament to what humanity could achieve. It was a beacon, a doorway, showing that beyond fear, beyond scarcity, there lies a horizon unbound, waiting for those brave enough to reach for it. The summer heat pressed down on New Brooklyn, the streets shimmering beneath its weight. Dr. Alaya Chen stared at the power meter on her screen, her chest tightening as the energy bar dipped, flickered, and then plummeted into the red. Another blackout, the third in 2 days. From her office window, Alaya could see people below, fanning themselves, glancing up at the darkened buildings with frustration and something more, a simmering anxiety. Renewable grids like New Brooklyn's were supposed to be resilient. Models of sustainable energy powered by solar panels, wind farms, and batteries designed to keep the city running through anything. But today, those towering structures lining the horizon felt like monuments to promises left unfulfilled. The lights flickered back on, her screen illuminating the graphs she'd been staring at. A brief respite. She felt no comfort in it, only the familiar sense of futility that had crept into her life over the years. This blackout wasn't just a glitch. It was a sign, the slow unraveling of a system that everyone around her refused to admit was failing. Sitting at her desk, Alaya's mind drifted to her early days. She had once believed in the power of innovation, convinced that cities like New Brooklyn could lead humanity into a sustainable future. Back then, she'd held on to the belief that she could make real change, that her research and dedication might inspire a shift away from profit-driven infrastructure. She remembered long nights in her cramped first office, driven by a desire to solve energy problems. Her walls covered with notes and ambitious blueprints. But over time, her hope had eroded. Each passing year saw the clean energy systems she'd helped design, powering luxury high-rises and lining corporate pockets, rather than transforming lives. Her colleagues had long since abandoned the ideals that had first brought them here, and she couldn't entirely blame them. She'd watched as the system she once believed in became just another business sector, shaped by corporate interests and short-sighted decision-makers. Her gaze fell on a faded photograph of Jack Fresco, the visionary whose ideas had inspired her back in college. Fresco had dreamed of a world built on sustainable, equitable resource management, a resource-based economy that transcended ownership and competition. Alaya had studied his work fervently, captivated by his vision in her younger years. But now those ideals felt distant, like a memory from another life, a promise she wasn't sure she knew how to believe in anymore. A sudden chime pulled her from her thoughts. She glanced at her screen, her pulse quickening as she read the sender's name. Malik Rahim. Malik had been her mentor during graduate school, the one who introduced her to Fresco's ideas, challenging her assumptions about scarcity, competition, and the need for a fundamentally new system. He had left academia years ago, his reputation tarnished for refusing to compromise on his beliefs. They hadn't spoken in years, yet here he was, reaching out as if no time had passed.
Alaya, you know as well as I do, the system is failing. I've seen you try to change things from the inside, and I know how futile it feels. You're not alone. The warehouse on Red Hook. Midnight, there's something you need to see. Malik.
Her curiosity swelled as she reread the message. Malik was never one to mince words, but this had a different tone, a raw urgency she couldn't ignore. If Malik believed there was something worth seeing, she had to know what it was. She could still hear Malik's voice from years ago, echoing in her mind.
The systems we know aren't just flawed. They're designed to limit us, Alaya. Scarcity, ownership, competition, they're constructs that keep us trapped.
Back then, his words had felt like a spark, igniting possibilities she'd barely dared consider. But over the years, each attempt to change the system from within had dulled that spark until it was barely an ember. Now, with Malik's message and the quiet urgency woven into his words, she felt that ember flicker to life again. Could there be a path forward that wasn't just an endless cycle of compromises? A path where the ideals she'd once believed in might actually hold weight? As midnight approached, Alaya left her office and took the subway to the city's edge, her footsteps echoing in the near-empty train. Her mind spun with thoughts of Malik, their past discussions, the fire he had sparked in her to imagine something beyond the systems of survival and scarcity. The train brought her to Red Hook, where the city's lights faded, replaced by dark warehouses and derelict buildings. Malik's lab lay hidden behind rusted gates and graffiti-covered walls, tucked away in a forgotten corner. She hesitated at the entrance, taking a deep breath before pushing the door open. The lab was a maze of blueprints, wires, and half-assembled machines, all bathed in the dim glow of hanging lights. Malik stood at a large table, his face illuminated by the soft glow of a screen. He looked older, his hair streaked with grey, but his eyes still held the intensity she remembered. He nodded as she entered, a hint of a smile breaking his usual seriousness.
Alaya,
He said.
I knew you'd come.
They stood in silence for a moment, then he motioned her over to a large blueprint laid out across the table. Alaya's eyes traced the lines and shapes, taking in a city unlike anything she'd ever seen. Buildings interwoven with green spaces, pathways connecting communal hubs, resources flowing as if in an ecosystem.
This is Horizon 1.
Malik said quietly, pride and determination woven into his tone.
A self-sustaining city, designed to operate without money or ownership. Resources are shared. People live without the need for competition. This isn't just a dream, Alaya. It's a controlled experiment in human potential. Every decision here, allocation of resources, community planning, even conflict resolution, is designed to follow the scientific method. We're not leaving things to chance or ideology. We test, we learn, we adapt.
Alaya felt her skepticism rising, but she couldn't look away.
No ownership, no currency. How do you expect people to just trust in that?
Malik met her gaze, his voice steady.
People are tired, Alaya. Tired of fighting, tired of fearing. Horizon 1 is a place where they don't have to compete for survival. It's possible, but we have to show them.
She scanned the blueprint, feeling an unshakable weight in his words. It was bold, idealistic, almost impossible. Yet something about it stirred a hope within her that she thought had long since died. For hours, Malik and Alaya pored over the plans, discussing every detail of Horizon 1's systems. He explained how they would build everything, from sustainable energy sources to communal spaces designed to replace traditional housing. His vision was audacious, radically different from anything she had ever known. And for the first time in years, Alaya found herself believing it might be possible. As dawn crept over the horizon, Malik handed her a small 3D printed model of Horizon 1, a scaled-down version of the blueprint.
This isn't just an idea, Alaya,
he said, his voice low and certain.
We're going to make this a reality.
She held the model in her hands, feeling its weight as though it were a piece of the future they'd dreamed about. She thought of New Brooklyn, the city she was supposed to save, crumbling under the weight of broken promises. And here, in Malik's lab, she glimpsed a world that might truly work for everyone. Looking up at Malik, she gave a small, determined nod.
Let's make it happen.
In the following weeks, Alaya made the decision to leave New Brooklyn, a choice she knew would come with sacrifices. Her colleagues were surprised, some even shocked. As she packed up her office, a young assistant named Thomas approached her, his face lined with worry.
"Are you sure about this, Dr. Chen?"
he asked hesitantly.
"I know things are tough here, but do you really think it'll be different somewhere else?"
She paused, a sad smile touching her lips.
It has to be, Thomas. There's only so much a broken system can change from within.
He watched her for a moment, then nodded, quiet respect in his eyes.
Then I hope you find what you're looking for.
As she walked out of the office for the last time, her heart was heavy but resolute. The life she was leaving behind offered familiarity and safety, but Horizon 1 represented a different future, a purpose she could no longer ignore. The storm finally struck 3 days after the blackout. Alaya watched from her apartment window as dark clouds churned overhead, and the first heavy raindrops splattered against the glass, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. Within moments, the streets below became rivers, sweeping debris along the currents as if reclaiming the city. New Brooklyn's renewable grid, designed to endure any weather, flickered once, then faded to black. Alaya leaned her forehead against the cool windowpane, taking in the rain-soaked skyline, blackened towers standing silent against the storm. This city was supposed to be a beacon of resilience, a promise that humanity could build a sustainable future. Yet here it was, crumbling under the weight of that promise. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the hollow ache of disappointment settle deep within her. With the power still out, she moved through her dim, silent apartment, its emptiness sharper in the darkness. She thought of her years of dedication, her belief that she could make a difference from within. But the steady pulse of optimism that once drove her had faded, replaced by a quiet disillusionment that had grown with each broken promise, each failed project. When Malik's message had come, it was like a spark, a reminder of something she'd nearly forgotten, her own sense of purpose. For years he had challenged her, questioned her incremental solutions to a system he saw as irredeemable. And tonight, as her city succumbed to the storm, she realized that Malik might have been right all along. The storm raged through the night, leaving New Brooklyn battered and silent by morning. When dawn broke, Alaya stepped outside, taking in the wreckage. Cracked sidewalks lay strewn with debris, and fallen power lines cast long shadows over flooded streets. Around her, people moved through the ruins, their faces etched with anger, disbelief, and simmering resentment.
Is this the progress they promised us?
Someone muttered nearby. The words echoed in Alaya's mind, each one adding weight to her growing certainty. She couldn't stay here, tethered to a system collapsing from within. Her path was clear. She was ready to see for herself the vision Malik had shared with her. Horizon 1 awaited, a chance to build something free from the burdens of the past, a fragile promise of what could be. New Brooklyn had been built on promises it couldn't keep, a beacon flickering under the weight of old systems and ideals. But here, at the city's edge, lay the beginning of something different, something unburdened by past failures and holding the fragile promise of what could be. The journey to Horizon 1 felt surreal for Alaya, a passage from one world to the next. As she left New Brooklyn behind, the landscape shifted from towering steel structures to the outskirts, a barren wasteland of rusted factories and graffiti-streaked warehouses. Malik had chosen this location for its emptiness, its potential for reinvention. But as Alaya gazed at the crumbling buildings and cracked sidewalks, the enormity of their ambition settled over her. This was either going to bloom into something transformative or collapse under its own weight. At the edge of the lot, she instinctively reached into her bag and touched the worn cover of The Best That Money Can't Buy, a book by Jacques Fresco she'd carried with her since college. It reminded her of why she had left everything familiar. The promise of a world beyond ownership, beyond competition. She could almost feel the weight of her old life fading behind her. The sterile office spaces, the long hours traded for diminishing hope. Here, she was beginning anew. On her first night at the site of Horizon 1, she stood alone, surrounded by open fields and construction equipment. The air filled with the faint hum of machines beginning to power up. She looked around, taking in the expanse of land, the outlines of foundations they would soon build upon. This was where it would all begin. A faint glow in the east hinted at dawn, casting a soft light over the barren landscape. She felt a surge of determination, her doubts fading in the face of the monumental task ahead. This was the world she'd fought for, the vision she'd nearly given up on. That night, she lay on the ground, staring up at the stars, the sound of early systems humming around her like the city's first heartbeat. She closed her eyes, a quiet promise forming in her mind. This is just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Malik and Alaya began building a team to bring Horizon 1 to life. Engineers, architects, artists, people drawn to the vision of a world beyond scarcity and competition joined them. Some were enthusiastic, others cautious, but all shared a glimmer of hope. Late one night, as they reviewed construction plans, Malik paused, his expression thoughtful.
Do you think we're asking too much of people?
He asked.
We're pushing against beliefs ingrained for generations.
Alaya met his gaze, her voice steady.
If we can show them it's real, that it's possible, then we're already offering more than they've ever had.
Malik's shoulders relaxed, a trace of relief crossing his face. For all his determination, she realized he needed reassurance too. He carried the weight of his vision like a quiet, relentless burden, and Alaya was beginning to understand just how much it had cost him. When the first residents arrived at Horizon 1, dawn was just breaking. Alaya watched as families, teachers, artists, and builders gathered in the central square, their faces a blend of wonder and disbelief. Children ran freely along the pathways, laughter echoing as they explored green spaces and towering solar panels. The scent of fresh greenery mingled with the faint hum of renewable energy, creating an atmosphere unlike anything Alaya had ever known. She moved through the crowd, feeling an energy that was contagious. A young boy knelt to examine a solar-powered model, eyes wide with curiosity, while an artist set up her easel to capture the golden light rising over Horizon 1's skyline. It wasn't just a blueprint anymore. It was real, a living, breathing community. As evening approached, Malik addressed the residents in the square, his voice carrying over the quiet crowd.
Horizon 1 is more than a city. It's a community built on trust, on shared purpose. We're here to build a society that doesn't rely on tradition or superstition. By learning and applying the scientific method, each of us can contribute to making Horizon 1 the best it can be, grounded in reason and evidence. Here we aren't defined by what we own, but by how we contribute to each other's well-being.
The residents listened, some with skepticism, others with quiet determination. Alaya looked out over the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. They had come here to leave behind a world of scarcity, to create something grounded in compassion and abundance. And now that vision was finally within their grasp. The sunset bathed Horizon 1 in warm light, and Alaya felt a deep calm settle within her. She glanced at Malik, who stood beside her, his face softened by the quiet satisfaction of seeing his vision come to life. They didn't need words to grasp the significance of this moment, the culmination of everything they had worked for. Horizon 1 wasn't just an experiment. It was a promise that there could be a world beyond fear, beyond competition. As the first lights of the city flickered on, Alaya knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. In the silence, there was a sense of fulfillment, a quiet certainty. Horizon 1 had become a reality, a beacon of hope in a world that had long forgotten what hope looked like. Malik stood beside Alaya, surveying the small team gathered around them, a blend of engineers, scientists, and idealists, all drawn by the same dream. Each of them carried stories of disillusionment. Engineers whose innovations had been twisted for profit, scientists whose work had been commandeered by corporate agendas, and young activists like Anna, inspired by the hope of a society free from competition. The morning sun glinted off shards of glass embedded in the ground, casting sharp sparkles over patches of green sprouting through cracks in the pavement. Malik pointed to a rusted scaffold and smiled.
This could be the skeleton of our first vertical farm. With some care, it'll stand up just fine.
Alaya tried to match his optimism, but she felt the challenge looming. Building a city was one thing, convincing its residents to abandon ingrained habits was another. As she stood there, surrounded by the soft rustling of plants and the quiet hum of wind, the silence felt almost foreign. The absence of New Brooklyn's relentless noise, replaced by a calm that Horizon 1 seemed to breathe as naturally as fresh air. The first task was to clear space, reclaiming patches of earth hidden beneath remnants of the past. Day by day, they worked to clear debris, each piece hauled away, revealing the foundation of what would become Horizon 1. By the end of the week, they had cleared enough land to begin installing the solar grids, each panel positioned carefully to capture maximum sunlight. One evening, as they watched the last panel hum to life, casting a soft glow over the clearing, Malik's voice was filled with awe.
We brought light to a place that's only known shadows.
Alaya felt pride swell within her. They were building more than just a city, they were creating a vision of the future, a future unbound by fear or scarcity. The vertical farms were next, a critical component of Horizon 1's design. Using salvaged scaffolding, they built towering structures to house crops. Alaya oversaw the irrigation system, threading tubing through each level to capture and recycle every drop of water. When the first green sprouts broke through the soil, she felt a rush of hope she hadn't experienced in years. One evening, Anna wandered into the farm, brushing her fingers over the leaves.
It feels like a dream,
She murmured, her eyes bright with wonder.
It's real, Anna,
Alaya replied, her voice softened by the moment.
and it's just the beginning.
But even as optimism grew, old habits surfaced. Adjusting to life without personal ownership proved difficult for some. Alaya noticed small gestures of hesitation. Initials carved onto tools, extra rations set aside, subtle claims on shared spaces. She understood that for people conditioned by scarcity, trust was an unfamiliar and sometimes uncomfortable path. The first real conflict arose during a community meeting. Lyle, a former construction worker, stood in the center, arms crossed, facing off against Caleb, a younger resident. Lyle's tone was defensive, skeptical.
We need to track who uses what, tools, resources. If we don't, it'll turn into chaos.
Caleb's frustration was evident as he countered.
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid, Lyle. We're here to build a community, not a warehouse where everything's claimed.
Alaya stepped forward, addressing the room.
Lyle's concerns are real. This is new for everyone, and it won't feel natural right away. But we're here to create a life without fear of losing what's ours, where everyone's needs are met without competition.
Lyle's shoulders relaxed slightly, though a trace of doubt remained on his face. He had once run his own business, a small construction firm that had been swallowed by corporate giants. That loss had taught him to cling tightly to anything he could call his own. Letting go of ownership felt to him like surrendering a piece of himself. Alaya stepped forward again, her voice calm but resolute.
I understand the need for security, Lyle. It's natural to want assurances, but Horizon 1 isn't about possession or control. It's about redefining what it means to belong. Here, we're building a place where everyone's needs are met because we choose to support each other, not because we're competing for limited resources. If we cling to the old ways, we risk rebuilding the very systems we came here to leave behind.
She paused, letting her words settle as she looked around the gathered crowd.
Trust won't come overnight. It's something we'll build together, one choice at a time. But the purpose of Horizon 1 is to show that we can live beyond the fear of loss or scarcity, that we can thrive by sharing, by redefining security not as control, but as connection. It's a journey, and though it may not feel natural yet, it's the path we've chosen.
Malik guided them in creating a communal gathering space in an old warehouse, where residents met nightly to share meals, tell stories, and address concerns. During these meetings, Malik would share anecdotes from his past. Stories of communities pooling resources in hard times, memories that seemed to reach people on a different level. One night, Malik shared a story about a neighborhood blackout.
People had almost nothing, but everyone came together.
He recalled, his gaze distant.
We pooled food, took turns watching the streets. That's how we got through it, together.
Alaya noticed Anna listening intently, her face reflecting the quiet power of Malik's words. These stories reminded them all of the resilience found in unity, a resilience Horizon 1 would need as it grew. After the meeting, Anna approached Alaya, her voice laced with doubt.
Do you think people can really live like this, without needing more?
Alaya smiled, reassuring.
If we're willing to trust each other and let go of the need to have, I think we can. But it's a choice we'll have to make every day.
The AI-managed resource system, designed to ensure fair distribution, was met with mixed reactions. Some residents saw it as an essential tool. Others felt it was an intrusive presence, quietly deciding what they deserved. For people like Lyle, it represented a loss of control, a shift that wasn't easy. One evening, Lyle approached Alaya, his face shadowed with worry.
This AI, it feels like it's watching us, making decisions for us. I didn't come here to be monitored.
Alaya met his gaze, her voice gentle.
The AI is here to ensure fairness, Lyle. It's about making sure everyone's needs are met, that no one has to go without.
He shook his head, distrust lingering.
Machines don't care, Dr. Chen. People do. And I'm here because I thought we'd be in control.
She nodded, recognizing his unease. Building trust would take time. Horizon 1 had to prove it was different, a place where systems worked in service of the people, not over them. Despite these challenges, Horizon 1 began to function. Solar grids powered the community, vertical farms yielded fresh food, and the AI managed resources equitably. But old habits didn't vanish overnight. Conflicts arose over shared tools and personal spaces, and the community meetings became both celebrations and outlets for tension. One evening, as Alaya and Malik walked through the quiet streets of Horizon 1, Malik sighed, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and exhaustion.
We've come so far, Alaya, but there's still so much to learn.
Alaya looked out at the softly glowing cityscape, feeling the weight of his words.
Change is hard, but every day we're showing that it's possible.
He met her gaze, resolute.
Then we keep going, together.
Soon, Horizon One's peace was disrupted by whispers of a journalist. Miriam Gray, probing and relentless, was investigating Horizon One's origins, funding, and technology. Malik dismissed her as just another skeptic, but Alaya sensed more. She recognized corporate interference when she saw it. Synex Corp, a powerful AI conglomerate, had subtly hinted that Horizon One's systems might infringe on their patents. The tension gnawed at her. Synex Corp was a giant, with the resources to dismantle Horizon One if they chose, and Miriam's probing could easily give them the leverage they needed. But as Alaya looked out over the softly lit city, a renewed sense of purpose rose within her. They had built something extraordinary, something worth protecting. Horizon One was more than a dream, it was a glimpse of what the world could be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew they would face them together. For now, Horizon One stood as a testament to hope, and Alaya was ready to do whatever it took to keep it alive.